Hi friends, if you're new here, which some of you may be because it's a brand new channel, but some of you may not be because you follow me on other forms of social media, I'm going to do a beginning of diagnosis for my husband Casey and then a separate video of current, after we moved to current. So my name is Danielle. I am a full-time caregiver for my husband Casey, who is about to be a retired United States Marine. I'm 36, he's 38. And last year in January, at the end of January, he traveled to New Orleans and he suffered a pretty severe brain bleed. He was unable to retrieve help for about 60 hours. So I'm not going to go too far into details about that for pretty specific reasons that I'm not able to mention at this time. But he was alone in a hotel room for about 60 hours, and once he finally got help, he was taken to Ochsner Medical on January 28th of 2025, and he was diagnosed with a massive brain bleed. I think it was like 40 millimeters by 38 millimeters. So he, by that time, had suffered from memory loss, confusion, difficulty speaking, just a whole slew of issues. So by the time that he was taken to the hospital, I was still back home in Maryland and I was actually working, and I had to leave work early because of like this whole thing, him being taken to the hospital. And I knew there was a huge possibility of me having to travel from Maryland to New Orleans to be with him because we didn't know how severe it was going to be. The doctors at the hospital had given me a call, and I needed to give verbal consent over the phone for him to get a bedside procedure called an EVD, and that is a drain that goes directly into the brain to drain off excess fluid and cerebrospinal fluid and blood, because there was so much swelling in his brain and so much extra fluid that it had nowhere else to go. So it was like crushing his brain from the outside in and the inside out. So, and I think he had like a 1.1 centimeter midline shift, which is pretty significant. So the middle of his brain, instead of being here, was like pushed over for certain parts of his brain. So we were there he was admitted January 27th, and he was discharged February, I think, 11th or 12th. On February 5th of last year, he underwent his first craniotomy, and that was to evacuate a massive blood clot. And the whole time, the hospital's telling us, there may be some kind of lesion in there, possible tumor. We're not sure. There's so much swelling that we can't tell the difference on the images between blood clot and swelling and possible tumor. So when they went in for the blood clot removal for the craniotomy on February 5th, they told me that there was so much swelling and so much bruising in his brain that they literally could not see any kind of tumor. So at that point, we have no idea what's going on. So we get home, and he was there for work. So the Marine Corps arranged a flight for us to get home. And we get home on Valentine's Day, and he has a Foley catheter because one of the things that was a result of the brain swelling and the brain bleed was his bladder wasn't able to relieve itself, which we later found out was called neurogenic bladder, and that's something that he still suffers with. So we get home, and everything is fine throughout the weekend. It's a holiday weekend, of course, so it's a long weekend. And February 18th, he actually got up at like 5 o'clock in the morning to empty his Foley bag. And I woke up when he got out of bed, and I told him, just take it slow, walk really slow down the hallway, take your time, don't rush. And he said, okay, I will. And then the next 45 seconds later, I hear a crash in the front bathroom. And I jump up out of bed, and he had completely fallen and he was not conscious. So before he left for New Orleans, he was actually in the process of renovating our bathroom and our master bedroom. So that bathroom was not able to be used. So he had to go to our guest bathroom, which is a pretty small bathroom. You walk in and there was a sink right here, there's a toilet, and then the bathtub. and I don't even think he had made it to the toilet because of where his feet were when I got in the bathroom. But he had fallen sideways, and if this is the door right here, his head was kind of like pushed up against the door with laying on the ground. I thought maybe he just fainted and passed out. I think now that it may have been something called an absence seizure, so it's like a non-convulsive seizure. I had to pull him slightly out of the bathroom so I could straighten his body out. I just kept him like super still, made sure that he was, breathing. I'm trying to get his attention. I'm trying to wake him up, but nothing is working. His eyes are fixed straightforward to the ceiling. And once he comes out of it, like, he lays there for a second, and then he kind of just jumps up, and despite me being like, whoa, you need to chill out because you literally were just unconscious on the floor. He tries to go back to bed, and I'm like, that doesn't work for me. You have two options. You can get dressed, and we can slowly go downstairs, and I can take you to the hospital, or you can stay in your underwear, and EMS will come and take you to the hospital almost naked. And he chose, after a minute, to get dressed, and we went to the hospital. They did a CT, obviously, because he had just had brain surgery. He hit his head. And they came and talked to us and were like, we're actually going to airlift you guys or we're going to airlift him to this hospital in Washington, D.C. And we're like, okay. And they were like, we think that there's a brain mass. And, I kind of expected it, but I also didn't expect it. Like, the hospital was like, the Ochsner was like, we got the blood clot. There may be a lesion. There may not be. We don't really know. It's going to be hard to tell until some of the swelling goes down. And I just remember thinking, like, what the fuck? Like, he's healthy. He's active. He runs every day. He works out every day. He literally was just renovating our bathroom less than a month ago. When we got home, he was doing okay. Like, his memory was still not the greatest, but it was improved from the hospital. He was walking around okay. Like, everything was fine. And now we're being told that he possibly has brain cancer or likely has brain cancer. They're like, we don't know if it's benign or if it's malignant. Once we get you to Washington, D.C., they're going to be able to give you some more information. So he's airlifted there. I have to go home. And we had a dog at the time, and I had to figure out how to get him taken care of. So when we were in New Orleans, I had just like frantically dropped my dog off at a boarding place, like right before they closed on January 27th, like the evening of it. And I flew out January 28th, and then Casey Sergeant Major had gotten a hold of me from Pax River, where he was stationed, was like, I know we don't know each other, but I also have a yellow lab, and I would not want my dog to be in a boarding facility. I'm going to go pick him up. So if you're okay with that. And I was like, well, we don't really trust a lot of people with our dogs. Like, with our dog, he's old. He takes arthritis medication. He's like, I don't care. I'm going to go pick up your dog. And like, I cannot be more thankful for him and his family because they loved our dog like we loved him. They sent us pictures every day. So I texted his sergeant major after he was airlifted, and I was like, can you take Moose again? If not, I can board him, obviously. But, he did really well at your house. Can you guys take him for, I don't even know how long? And he's like, absolutely. So I can't remember if he came and picked him up or if I dropped him off on base. I think I might have just dropped him off on base. And Moose, our dog, had become like the mascot of like their little Marine Corps detachment. So they all got used to seeing him there, and he loved going to work with Sergeant Major. So I'm really, really grateful that he had somewhere to go with a lot of people that really enjoyed being around him and took care of him. So I get to the hospital in Washington, D.C., and I am talking to neurosurgery. I'm talking to ICU doctors because that's where he was admitted, was an ICU. And they do an MRI, and we're told that, he's going to need another brain surgery. So, and again, he went on February 5th for a craniotomy, and by February 22nd, he was having his second craniotomy. And we had a really good friend. We have a really good friend who lives in Virginia that came over and sat with me during Casey's second craniotomy and kind of kept my mind a little bit sane while I was going crazy inside. And they told us that they removed a tumor about the size of a clementine, like a small clementine. So they had to send it off for pathology to find out what kind of tumor it is, but they're preparing us for like the worst. They do think it's glioblastoma. We finally get the reports back a while later, and it came back as grade 4 glioblastoma, unmethylated IDH wild type. So that's like literally the worst kind of brain cancer you can have because it's aggressive. It doesn't respond well to treatment. It doesn't respond to chemotherapy very well. There's not a lot that can be done for it. So Casey is in the hospital and he's recovering well. We get discharged to go home. Things are okay. And then I take him, he still has a Foley catheter at this time. So I was a medical assistant for about 7 years, and I have tested more pee than a normal person should ever be around pee. So I can smell a UTI, and I told him like, I can't do anything about this. We don't have any catheter supplies for me to do like straight caths for you at home. We need to go to the hospital. We need to get the Foley taken out. We need them to get you some antibiotics. So we go to the hospital, and I tell them, I think he's got a UTI. He had a brain surgery on the 22nd. He had another brain surgery on the 5th of February, because now we're looking in March. And they were like, okay, well, he does have a UTI, so let's replace the catheter, get him on some antibiotics. But then they do a CT and they find out that he has brain swelling again. So I can't remember if it was like another bleed or if it was just swelling. So something in his brain is not working the way it needs to, and it's building fluid. So on March 11th, he goes in for a third brain surgery and he gets a VP shunt placed. And things go okay after that. I think around that time frame, like later in March, we find out the tumor genetic type. And he started on radiation and oral chemotherapy, which is temozolomide. He does 6 weeks of that. So during those 6 weeks, we are not able to be home because it's like a 2-hour drive to the hospital and back to our house. And that's just it's not doable in like his condition. Like he's doing okay, he's doing well, but that would really take a toll on him driving 2 hours each way just for radiation every day. So we end up staying in Bethesda at the Fisher House on base, and Sergeant Major has our dog again. So again, he had our dog for 6 weeks. So he had our dog from like January 30th maybe until February 15th. And then again from February 22nd until I don't even know when. And then while he was again in the hospital again in March. And then from the end of March all the way up until May 1st or 2nd. So he had our dog for a significant amount of time. And I am so grateful for his family because our dog was our baby. So things are going well. Casey gets admitted or goes to the hospital a couple of times during his radiation sessions. His shunt had malfunctioned. We had some issues with it. But May 1st, he finished and radiation, and we got to go home. And, things were going good. And then we ended up having to put our dog down at the end of May, which really took a toll on Casey because we lost our other dog shortly after we moved to Maryland. She had lymphoma, and we did like a bunch of chemotherapy and treatments for her, but eventually we just had to let her go. It was becoming too hard for her. So we lost one dog, and when we got home from New Orleans, he kind of forgot that we only had one dog left. So coming home from being away from our other dog for so long was really hard. Like it made him so happy to see him again. And then we have to put him down because he ended up getting an infection. We found out he had a neurological issue, like he was not doing good. He could barely walk. So we called Lap of Love, and they came and put him to sleep in our living room, and that was really, really emotional because I don't think Kacey fully understood what was happening at the time, and I kind of felt like I was going through it alone. But Kacey was doing like outpatient PT on base, and it was pretty intensive. And then in June, like I think it was like June 9th maybe, he had a seizure, and that took away like his ability to walk, and it took away his his whatever abilities he had really to speak. Like he could still talk, but it made everything so much worse, like the seizure did. So he was admitted to the hospital for that for a significant amount of time, and not a lot was being done as far as like treatments go. He still had hydrocephalus in his brain. He still had a midline shift, and things just weren't going well. He was bedridden. It took a lot of effort to get us to Georgetown. I had to buy a specialized wheelchair to get him up and down our stairs so that he could be comfortable in our bedroom. He couldn't shower he couldn't shower at all. Like we were doing bath wipes in bed to get him clean. So he couldn't do anything. He could barely take his medications. He was having a lot of vomiting and like seizure like episodes in the middle of the night. We had to buy a suction machine to be able to clear his airway, and it was pretty traumatic. So he was bedridden from like mid-June all the way up until we moved at the end of August. So I felt like he wasn't receiving like essentially any care at all at the hospital we were at. And I was advocating really, really fucking hard for him. And I felt like I was just like screaming into the void of someone please help him, because nothing is being done. We're being declined all treatments. Every time I ask for something new, it's being declined. He's on a high dose of steroids, and you know, he's having a lot of side effects from it. Doctors aren't listening to me. And I'm just watching him slowly like decline and slip away, and no one is listening. And it's like a whole team of doctors at this facility, and they're just letting it happen. And I'm not really comfortable talking about the facility right now, like the name of it. So maybe in a future video I will. But at this time I'm not comfortable with that. But I get to a point where I'm like, I need to move. And, you know, he's transferred from his current unit over to Wounded Warrior in Washington, D.C., Bethesda area. And I'm telling them, like, he's not getting the care he needs. I need to get him to a specialized treatment center that specializes in cancer treatment specifically, and has, like, a good rate for glioblastoma patients. So I started doing a lot of research, and I found Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa, Florida. Earlier in the year, Kacey was assigned a recovery core coordinator through Wounded Warrior, and he's out of Jacksonville, North Carolina, and he's amazing. His name is Christopher. But I'm talking to him about getting Kate, like how we need to get Kacey somewhere better. He needs better care. He needs a team of doctors that will listen and actually do something, because now I feel like his doctors know, like, okay, well, he's a terminal patient. He's, you know, and I hate saying this, but he's going to die at some point anyways. So why make the effort? And that's genuinely what it felt like to me, is they had just given up on him. So he's like, you know, and I tell him I found this place, and it seems like they do really good work. They have great reviews. It's called Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa. And he's like, you know, it's crazy that you mentioned that, because I have another Marine who was just diagnosed with cancer, and I don't know what kind. But he's like, you know, he's from Florida, but he is stationed in California, and he's literally PCSing, like moving from California to Florida, Tampa, Florida, for Moffitt Cancer Center. And it kind of felt like kismet, because I had never heard of it before. I'm talking to this recovery care coordinator, and, you know, I had gone between like Duke in North Carolina, the Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins. I'd read about a whole bunch of different places, and something just kept pulling me back to Moffitt. And when he said that, I was like, okay, this is it. Like, I feel like this is a sign. So I scheduled a consultation, and unfortunately, because we did not live in Florida, we had to travel from Maryland to Florida. And his oncologist at the time was like, I don't think he's going to make the drive. I don't think it's going to be safe for him. I'm concerned about that. And I was like, well, you have no choice in this. You don't get a say. You've had months to do something for him and to help him, and you've done nothing. He's done nothing but decline under your care. So respectfully, or absolutely disrespectfully at this point, because I don't fucking care anymore, the only people that can stop us is the Marine Corps, and they're on board with it. So they're actually paying for us to rent a car and get there and stay for our hotel stays and to get back home. So this is happening whether you like it or not. So we get there, we schedule it. He has a consultation at the end of July, and it took a lot to get us there, like physically, for Casey. But we get there, and as soon as we get to the hotel, we get out of the car, and he has like this seizure, vasovagal syncope type episode getting out of the car. But that's the only event that he had the whole time we were here, and we were only here for like 2 or 3 days. But he has this episode. But when we get here, he's suddenly doing so much better. Like, he's able to take a couple like heavily assisted steps. Like, he's reaching for his own food and drinks. He's able to kind of like put snacks in his mouth, whereas he couldn't really do that very well before. We had a friend that lives in St. Pete, and he came to see us. But we get to the hospital, or to Moffitt, for his consultation. And when I tell you, Dr. Grogan at Moffitt Cancer Center is phenomenal. I don't think Casey would still be alive today if it wasn't for him. We get there, and we're waiting for a while, and they're running a little bit behind. And I'm like, I don't even care at this point, because the care is already better here. So when I had scheduled a consultation appointment, like at his old hospital, I had asked what treatments are available, what clinical trials are available, and everything was just kind of like, it won't work for his tumor type. It won't work. No, we're not going to look at clinical trials. Like, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. Everything was just no, or it won't work for his tumor type. So when I called Moffitt for the consultation, the first thing the operator asked me was, are you guys open to clinical trials? And I instantly started crying, because I had been asking and screaming for help. And like, I'm not even talking to like actual like clinical medical staff yet. I'm talking to administrative people, and they're asking me these questions. Like, this feels right. Like, we're going to get help. So we get to his appointment, and Casey's in a wheelchair, and Dr. Grogan's like, you're an active duty Marine. I'm going to guess you used to have a lot more muscle tone than you do now. Like, you used to be much more muscular. And we all were like, yes, because it was both of my parents, Casey and myself. And he's like, you're on a very high dose of steroids, and you've been on it for a really long time. And something called muscle wasting syndrome happens when you're on long-term high-dose steroids. And that's what I see. I see a pretty significant case of muscle wasting syndrome. So if you are able to transfer here, one of the first things I want to do is get you off those steroids, or get them from the dose you're on now and taper them down as low as possible. And when I had asked his previous oncologist about treatments, I had asked, what are your other glioblastoma patients with this similar genetic makeup type on? And she's like, some of them are on immunotherapy. I was like, great, let's try it. And she says, no, it won't work for his tumor type. In my head, I'm thinking, like, you just told me your other patients with similar genetic makeups are on immunotherapy, but now you're telling me it won't work for his tumor type. Like, it doesn't make sense. So his new oncologist at Moffitt is like, I want to get him started on immunotherapy, and there's this medication called Avast. And I was like, I actually asked his previous oncologist, or at the time his current oncologist, about this, and she said no, because it puts him at a risk for bleeding, and he's already had a brain bleed. But at this point, it had been stable for months now, since like February, March timeframe. He had no brain bleed, but he'd had consistent hydrocephalus with midline shift, that nothing was being done, and the steroids weren't helping, obviously, and they were causing more problems than not. And she said, and it also makes him no longer a candidate for future surgeries because of that bleeding risk. And I was like, well, neurosurgery already said he's no longer a candidate for additional surgeries. So I'm not worried about surgeries because nobody will do them anyways. So why don't we just try it? And she said no. So Dr. Grogan at Moffitt was like, if he's been stable, I think it's worth trying. Like, we can spot a brain bleed. Like, we're going to monitor like heavily, especially with these first couple doses because of the risk. But I think it's worth it to try because the steroids are causing more harm than they're doing good. They're not doing anything at this point anymore. And before we even left, we had his consent form signed for immunotherapy, which is Keytruda and Avastin. And when I tell you this is the most amazing doctor I've ever seen, he walked in with like a 4-page hand-typed, like in-depth medical like knowledge sheet on Kacey, and his doctors at the hospital in Washington D.C. couldn't even tell you his history, and they had been treating him for months at this point. And this doctor who had not even met him had basically had this 4 pages memorized with just needing to like refer back to it like once or twice. So he knew everything from the beginning, from Ochsner to Washington D.C. to like current, and he's like, this is what we're going to be doing different. I'm sorry that you're not getting the care that you need, but we're going to do our best to get you in a different place. So we go home. I spend all of July and August getting things ready. We have to sell a house. We have to deal with like the Marine Corps stuff. It's like pretty tedious. I'm looking for a house here in Florida, and it luckily comes together really, really quickly. We get to Florida and August 27th, I think it was. So actually like 8 months to the day from the time that Kacey was taken to the hospital to get help. So we get to Florida, and his previous oncologist was like, I don't think it's safe for you to move. Like, I don't think he's going to do well on the move. Like, he's not stable. I'm concerned about him traveling that far, blah, blah, blah. And again, I'm like, it's already done. We have leases signed. I sold my house. So I'm going to make a part 2 because this video is getting a little bit long. But there are some stuff that like I did leave out, but like the important things are here. So if you watch this whole video, thank you, and stay tuned for the part 2, which is moving to Florida to current.